processes. You will have these crises breaking out and destabilizing not just Eurozone, but the whole of Europe, by the way. I think that to me this is the greatest lesson and the greatest disappointment, perhaps, of the debate in the past few weeks. It is so easy to, put the gun sights on just one country because it makes it easy for everyone else to say, oh, it's your fault, it's not mine, not my problem. We all have the problem, we all have to look into it. I hope this happens very soon.
Okay, well, on that note, thanks very much. Let's have a look now at what else has been going on here at the European Parliament and in the other institutions in Brussels.
Plans to extend maternity leave to 20 weeks on full pay across Europe were supported by members of the Parliament's Women's Committee. Fathers working at the Parliament also turned up to back plans for 2 weeks fully paid paternity leave. There could be less support at the full Parliament's vote in March.
Families shouldn't be penalized for having children, and they must be encouraged.
The European Commission's recommended starting talks with Iceland on it becoming a member of the European Union. The decision will now be considered by the EU's 27 member states, but Britain and the Netherlands could object if no deal is reached with Iceland on debts arising from its 2008 banking collapse. And MEPs have given a cautious welcome to the first major reform of Europe's common fisheries policy in more than a decade. The policies would be less centralised with more emphasis on sustainability, but there are still worries.
The rejection by the European Parliament of the so-called SWIFT agreement with the United States at February's Strasbourg session has, in the view of many, left governments extremely vulnerable in the fight against terrorism. A majority of MEPs voted to reject a temporary agreement which would have allowed US authorities to access information about international money transfers.
There is now no deal. The Parliament used its new powers under the Lisbon Treaty because MEPs said EU governments had failed to give them guarantees that they'd asked for that people's privacy will be respected.
Well, Timothy Kirkhope and Sarah Ludford, you're both on the Parliament's US delegation and you're going there next week. Timothy Kirkhope, you also lead the British Conservatives and a deputy leader of the European Conservatives and Reformist group, and Sarah Ludford, you're a British MEP for the Liberal Democrats and speak for that group on civil liberties. Sarah, a lot of people have been saying that this was an example of the European Parliament flexing its muscles, power games, which has actually left the EU and the US in a more vulnerable position than if there had been an interim agreement in place.
No, I don't think it was a flexing its muscles, any kind of power grab, let alone anti-Americanism. A majority of nearly 400 people MEPs voted to reject this agreement because for several years we've been saying it's inadequate. It doesn't sufficiently protect the privacy interests of European citizens. So this didn't come out of the blue. We have been consistent with what we've been saying. So I do reject the idea there's any kind of gesture politics, let alone anti-American gesture politics.
I mean, with your new powers under the Lisbon Treaty, Timothy Kirkhope, it is the job of MEPs, isn't it, to make sure these protections of people's civil liberties are there, and apparently they weren't.
Yeah, well, I take a different view to Sarah altogether about this. I think we've had a considerable amount of information and assurances, both through the European Parliament, but also in the United States as well. And I think this is a vitally important measure. I think that the Parliament has been involved in gesture politics here. Obviously there's irritation with the way we were treated by the Council, with which I concur, but I do think this was an example for us. We could have shown that we were above all that, and we were very responsible in our new important role, and we should have actually allowed the provisional agreement to go ahead with negotiations on the full agreement to follow. I think we've made a big mistake.
No, I think we just simply weren't given any decent response from the Council that on the substance...
The EU government.
Yes, from the EU governments, 27 governments, that on the substance they really were going to work for a stronger agreement. It's not about assurances from the US, it's what's written in black and white in the agreement, and that doesn't give sufficient confidence on issues like how long the data will be stored, which other agencies and countries it could be transferred to, what happens if something goes wrong or someone's data is misused, what redress can they have. Those are really basic.
Than it did, though.
Oh yes, it's better, and I think that's some tribute to the pressure from the Civil Liberties Committee over several years, since 2006 when we first learnt about this, because it was entirely